"She's unstable," my mother-in-law told the mediator, loud enough that I could hear her from the hallway. "Emotionally unstable, financially irresponsible, and frankly, that little girl would be better off with us full-time." I was standing outside the conference room door with my daughter's stuffed rabbit tucked under my arm because she'd left it in my bag that morning, and I was trying to be a good mom even on the worst days. I didn't say anything. I just stood there and let her talk. That was a mistake she would spend the next 18 months regretting. Let me back up. My name is Mara. I'm 31 years old. For the past 6 years, I worked as a senior compliance analyst at a regional bank. The kind of job that sounds boring at dinner parties but means I spend my days reading financial records the way other people read mystery novels. I know how to find the lie inside a spreadsheet. I know how to follow a money trail that someone has tried very hard to bury. It's not glamorous, but I'm good at it. Very good. My ex-husband, whose name I'll say once and then I'm done, Griffin, did not know this when he married me. He knew I worked in finance. He did not understand what that meant. Most people don't until they do. We met in our mid-20s at a rooftop party neither of us wanted to be at. He was charming in that effortless way that takes a lot of effort to maintain. He had a smile that made you feel like the only person in the room. I was 25 and I thought that was love. By 27, we were married. By 29, we had our daughter, Emmy. By 30, I was filing for divorce because I found out he'd been running a side business I knew nothing about, funded, in part, by our joint savings account. I didn't yell. I didn't throw things. I sat at our kitchen table and I looked at him and I said, "I need you to leave tonight." And he looked surprised, like he'd expected something dramatic, and I think that scared him more than anything else could have. The divorce itself was civil enough on paper. But the moment his mother got involved, everything changed. My mother-in-law. I'll call her what Emmy calls her, Grandma Cynthia, though the woman doesn't deserve that title. Had never liked me. From the beginning, I was too quiet for her taste, too careful, too unwilling to gush over her son the way she needed everyone to. When I filed for divorce, she didn't see a marriage ending. She saw a threat. She started small. Little comments to mutual friends. Mara was never really committed. Mara struggles with her emotions. I worry about that baby. I really do. Then she got bigger. She started pushing Griffin to fight for primary custody, not because he wanted it. Griffin loved Emmy, but he loved his freedom more, and anyone who knew him knew that. But Cynthia wanted it. She wanted to punish me for leaving her son, and a custody battle was the cleanest weapon she had. That summer was the hardest of my life. I want to be honest about that, not perform it. There were nights I sat in Emmy's room after she fell asleep and just listened to her breathe because I needed to know she was right there, solid, real, mine. She was 2.5. She had dark curly hair like her dad and my grandmother's eyes. She called her stuffed rabbit Bun Bun and refused to eat anything orange. The mediator sessions started in July. Cynthia attended half of them despite having no legal standing to do so. She would sit in the waiting area and make comments as I walked past. "She looks tired. Did you see the bags under her eyes? I hope someone's making sure that baby's getting proper meals." I said nothing. Every time. Not because I was passive, but because I was documenting. The day of the mediation session where she called me unstable, I had already been building my file for 6 weeks. Bank records, property records, conversations I'd had with Griffin that he didn't know I'd been noting down afterward. I had his business entity, the one he'd run out of our joint account, filed with the state of Illinois, registered 8 months before he claimed it started. I had the transfer records. I had everything. I wasn't there to fight dirty. I was there to be precise. The mediator that day was a woman named Patricia. No relation to anyone in my family, just a professional with reading glasses and a manner that said she'd heard every version of this story. She was good at her job. Patient. She let Cynthia finish her speech about my emotional instability, and then she set down her pen and looked at me. "Would you like to respond?" "Not yet," I said. Cynthia smiled. I think she thought that meant she'd won something. The mediation stalled because Griffin's team kept introducing new requests. Primary custody. Reduced child support. The family home, which, and this is important, I had purchased before we were married using money I'd saved myself. My attorney had flagged this in our initial filing. Griffin's attorney seemed to think it was negotiable anyway. My attorney's name was Vera. She was 54, wore her silver hair in a knot at the back of her head, and had the kind of professional reputation that walked into the room ahead of her. She looked at me in our first meeting and said, "Tell me everything you found." And I did. I spent 2 hours walking her through the spreadsheet I'd built. When I finished, she closed her laptop and said, "Okay, we're going to be fine." I needed to hear that more than I realized. The thing about a custody battle that no one tells you is how it breaks up time. Every week is divided between the weeks you have Emmy and the weeks you don't. The weeks I don't have her are the worst. The apartment is too quiet. I eat dinner standing at the counter because sitting at the table alone feels like an accusation. I go to work and I do my job and I am functional and professional, and then I come home and I sit on the bathroom floor sometimes for no reason except that it feels contained. Emmy came back to me one Sunday in August and she had a new dress on that I'd never seen, hot pink with little ruffles, and she twirled around my kitchen showing it off. "Grandma Cinna got it," she said. And I said, "Oh, how pretty," and I meant it because the dress was pretty and she looked beautiful in it, and none of that was her fault. But later that night, when I was giving her a bath, she said something that stopped me cold. "Grandma Cinna says Mommy has to go away soon." I kept my voice steady. "Go away where, baby?" She shrugged. "Just away, so I can live at Grandma Cinna's house more." I said, "You're not going anywhere. You live with Mommy, remember? And sometimes Daddy. And sometimes Daddy, and sometimes Daddy." "That's right." She seemed satisfied with that. She went back to splashing. But I sat on the edge of the tub for a long time after she fell asleep that night, and I thought about what it means when an adult uses a 2-year-old to send a message. I thought about what kind of person does that. And then I thought about the file on my laptop and I thought, almost there. The custody hearing was in October. October in Chicago means gray skies and leaves going brown and everyone walking a little faster with their shoulders up. I wore my navy suit, the one I wear when I need to feel armored. I drove myself. I arrived 12 minutes early. Griffin's side arrived with his mother and his attorney, a man named Keller who had a gold watch and the habit of speaking over the other person in the room. Cynthia was wearing a cream blazer and had clearly just come from a salon. She looked at me across the lobby and tilted her head the way someone does when they think they're winning. I looked right back. Then I went to find Vera. "Ready?" she said. "Yes." The hearing started with Griffin's attorney making an argument about the importance of extended family in a child's development, which was a creative way of arguing that Cynthia should have legal access to Emmy's schedule. He talked for a while. He was polished. I sat with my hands folded and watched the judge. Judge Alleman was a compact woman with close-cropped gray hair and an expression that revealed exactly nothing. She'd been on the family court bench for 19 years. She took notes. She listened to Keller. She listened to my ex-husband, who said he wanted to be more present in his daughter's life, which was interesting given that he'd missed her pediatric checkup in June because he had a golf weekend. Then Vera stood up. She started with the property. The house, she explained, was purchased by me alone in 2019, before the marriage, with funds from my personal savings account. She presented the purchase records, the deed, the account statements. Keller started to object. Judge Alleman held up one hand without looking at him, and he stopped. Vera moved to the business. She explained that Griffin had registered an LLC in January of last year, 8 months before he'd claimed to my attorneys it existed. She presented the registration documents. She presented the transfer records showing $17,000 moved from our joint account into the LLC's operating account over 9 months. She presented 3 months of statements that showed the LLC had generated revenue that had never appeared in any financial disclosure Griffin had filed. The room was very quiet. "Your Honor," Vera said, "my client is not here to make accusations. She is here to ask that the record reflect an accurate picture of the financial situation of both parties so that this court can make a decision in the best interest of their daughter." Judge Alleman was looking at Griffin's attorney. "Mr. Powell attorney." "Keller," she said, "did you know about this business entity?" There was a pause. "We were aware of a business," he said carefully. "In its early stages. The filing date is January of last year. The assets were drawn from the marital account. This does not look like early stages to me." She set down her pen. "I'm going to need amended financial disclosures from your client within 10 days. Cynthia, who was sitting in the gallery, made a sound. The judge looked at her. "Ma'am, this is a courtroom. If you can't remain quiet, you'll need to wait outside." Cynthia pressed her lips together. She looked at me for the first time with something that wasn't contempt. But the moment I will keep for the rest of my life came about an hour later, after Keller had tried twice to redirect the hearing toward what he kept calling the emotional environment of the child. Judge Alleman had been patient with this. She had listened, and then she looked at Vera and said, "I want to make sure I understand your client's professional background." Vera said, "Of course, Your Honor, Miss," and she said my full name, my professional name, the name attached to 6 years of compliance work and 2 federal audit support cases, and 1 securities fraud investigation that I'd assisted on 2 years ago that I'm not going to get into detail on here, but it was significant. Keller's head came up. Judge Alleman looked at him. "I assume you're familiar with her background?" There was a pause that lasted exactly long enough to tell me everything. "We were aware she worked in finance," he said. Judge Alleman looked back at her notes. "She doesn't work in finance, Mr. Balliman. Keller, she works in financial compliance and forensic analysis." She paused. "Your client has been attempting to conceal assets from someone who finds concealed assets for a living." Another pause. "Do you want to take a recess?" Keller asked for a recess. I sat in the hallway with Vera while she made a call, and I sat with my hands in my lap, and I breathed. Just breathed. The fluorescent lights hummed. Somewhere down the hall, a door opened and closed. I thought about Emmy and her ruffled pink dress spinning around my kitchen, and I thought, I'm going to be okay. We're going to be okay. We're going to be okay. When we went back in, Keller had conferred with Griffin. The custody arrangement they'd been pushing, the one that would have given Griffin primary placement and left me with alternating weekends, was withdrawn. Quietly, without fanfare, like it had never been the plan at all. What replaced it was this: I kept the house. Emmy's primary residence stayed with me, where it had always been. Griffin got every other weekend and 1 evening per week, which was, honestly, more than he'd been using before any of this started. Child support was calculated on both incomes, with his business revenue now included in the calculation. The amended number was substantially higher than what he'd originally offered. There was one more thing. Vera had filed a separate motion, quietly, 2 weeks earlier. It requested that the court limit third-party interference in the co-parenting arrangement. Specifically, that no third party could represent either parent in custody communications, and that any decisions about Emmy's schedule, medical care, or schooling required sign-off from both parents only. Cynthia wasn't named in the motion. She didn't have to be. Everyone in the room knew who it was for. Judge Alleman granted it. On the way out of the courthouse, Cynthia caught up with me at the elevator. She looked smaller than she had that morning, still composed, still the cream blazer, but something was different in her posture. "I hope you're proud of yourself," she said. I pressed the elevator button. "I'm proud of my daughter," I said. "I'm going to go pick her up now." The doors opened. I stepped in. I didn't look back. Emmy's babysitter. Her name is Keandra. She's 22. She studies early education and she's better with kids than most adults I know. Had gotten Emmy from daycare and taken her to the park. When I pulled up, Emmy was at the top of the little plastic climbing structure, holding on with both hands and looking extremely serious about it. "Mommy." She waved with one hand and almost fell off, and I lunged toward the fence, and Keandra grabbed her from behind, and I stood there with my heart in my throat. And then Emmy laughed, delighted, completely unaware that she'd just taken 10 years off my life. I paid Keandra, and then it was just the 2 of us. We went to the diner 2 blocks from our house, the one with the red booths and the laminated menus, and Emmy had chocolate milk and a grilled cheese cut into triangles. She told me about a bird she'd seen at the park. She said it was very, very big, Mommy, bigger than a dog. I said that sounded like a Canada goose, and she said no, it was definitely a dragon, and I said okay. I had the turkey melt and coffee, and I sat across from my daughter and watched her arrange her grilled cheese triangles into a pattern that only she understood, and I thought about the past 8 months. The mediation sessions. The hallway. The attorney with the gold watch who hadn't done his homework. The judge's voice, careful and even. She doesn't work in finance, Mr. Keller. She works in financial compliance and forensic analysis. I hadn't walked into that courtroom angry. I hadn't walked in wanting to destroy anything. I'd walked in with a folder of facts and a very good attorney and 7 years of professional expertise, and that had been enough. More than enough. Emmy looked up from her cheese triangles. "Mommy, are you happy?" I looked at her. Her dark curly hair was in 2 uneven pigtails because she likes to help do them herself. She had chocolate milk on her upper lip. She was looking at me with this very serious, very focused expression, waiting for my answer. "Yeah, baby," I said. "I really am." She considered this for a moment, then nodded, satisfied, and went back to her triangles. Bun Bun was in my bag. The coffee was hot. Outside the window, the Chicago evening was turning a soft bruised purple, and for the first time in longer than I could remember, I felt the particular quiet that only comes when the fight is finally over and you're still standing. Griffin and I co-parent. It is not warm, but it is functional. He is better at being Emmy's part-time dad than I think he expected to be, and she loves him, and I want her to. That's the job. You just keep doing the job. Cynthia sends Emmy birthday cards. Emmy calls her Grandma Cinna and shows me the cards, and I say how nice, and I mean it the smallest amount possible, and then I move on. She has no say in Emmy's schedule, her school, her doctor. The court order is very clear on this. The house is mine. It was always mine. There's a corner in the backyard that gets afternoon sun, and Emmy likes to dig there looking for buried treasure, which is usually a rock or a bottle cap or once, memorably, an old skeleton key that we kept and hung on the kitchen wall. I repainted the kitchen last spring, pale yellow, Emmy's pick. It makes the whole room feel like morning. I don't tell this story to make anyone feel sorry for me, or to be impressive, or to perform strength I didn't always feel. I tell it because for about 3 months, I genuinely believed I was going to lose. I believed it because someone who wanted to hurt me said the right things to the right people at the right time, and for a while it worked. Fear is convincing even when it's built on nothing. But here's what Cynthia never understood, what Griffin never understood, what Keller with his gold watch definitely never understood. Being quiet is not the same as being weak. And knowing where the bodies are buried is not a metaphor when you do it for a living. Emmy is 3 now. Last week, she told me she wants to be a veterinarian when she grows up, specifically so she can take care of dragons. I said that sounded like a plan. She said, "You should be my helper, Mommy." I said, "Okay." She shook my hand very formally to make it official. "We have a deal." I used to think staying quiet was a form of losing. That if you didn't push back, didn't raise your voice, didn't make sure everyone in the room knew you were hurting, you were just letting them win. I believed that for a long time. Cynthia counted on me believing it. What I know now is that silence is only weakness when you have nothing behind it. When you do, when you've done the work, when you've kept your integrity intact while someone else was busy tearing yours apart, silence becomes something else entirely. It becomes patience. And patience, I've learned, is one of the most underestimated forms of strength there is. The cause and effect of this whole thing is almost embarrassingly straightforward when I look back at it. Cynthia decided I was easy to dismiss. She made that decision based on how I presented. Quiet, measured, not the type to make a scene. She treated that as evidence of weakness. She told a mediator I was unstable. She told her son's attorney I was financially irresponsible. She whispered things to mutual friends and let those things do their work. Every one of those choices came from the same assumption that she understood who I was. She didn't. And that single miscalculation is what undid everything she built. Here's what I think about when I think about that courtroom. I didn't walk in angry. I didn't walk in wanting revenge. I walked in having done the honest thing. I'd kept records. I'd been truthful in every disclosure. I'd built a case not out of spite, but out of precision. That's not a small thing. It would have been so easy in the middle of all that hurt to cut corners, to exaggerate, to let the anger do the driving. I didn't, and I think that's the only reason the outcome looked the way it did. Not because I was smarter than anyone in that room, but because I'd refused to become the thing they were accusing me of being. There's something I want to say to anyone who's been in a room where someone is using a microphone to rewrite who you are while you sit there without one. You don't always need the microphone. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is know clearly, calmly, without flinching, what is actually true. And then let the truth do what it does, which is eventually surface, whether anyone wanted it to or not. Emmy is 3. She shook my hand last week to seal a deal about dragon veterinary medicine. She has no idea what happened in that courtroom. She just knows her mom shows up. That's all she needs to know right now, and making sure that stays true. That's the whole job. I don't carry what Cynthia did to me as a wound anymore. I carry it more like a lesson I paid a high price to learn. That your character is not what people say about you in a conference room. It's what you do in the months before you get there. It's whether you told the truth when lying was easier. It's whether you got up on the mornings when getting up felt impossible. It's whether when everything was on the line, you still recognized the difference between who you actually are and who someone needed you to be for their story to work. I knew the difference. That's what saved us.